Thanks, Chris. This is fun. Hey, congrats. This is how much of a slacker I have been with NCS. This is a new location to me, and I know you're at least 6 months in plus here. So what a place, Chris. Great move. So it's my honor this morning to welcome and introduce our speaker, Brian Byers. I had the privilege of meeting Brian when he was a strapping teenager at Bradley Bourbonnais Community High School. He was a football star there. And since Brian has gone on to some great business success, he's written a couple of books. His one of his many business ventures that he's succeeded in is in the commercial coffee and water space. You'll hear from his story in a moment here. But the biggest thing that I think we can celebrate this morning is when Brian starts to share, you will early on start to understand not only is the guy so well rounded that he's nearly a professional golfer, he's nearly a professional cigar smoker. Uh, but more than anything else, he is uber networked by our God and King in the space of ministering to men here, abroad, across the nation. He is so committed to taking what God has done in his life and ministering to other business people, especially people that have achieved a lot of success in the business world, but maybe haven't met the King yet. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Brian Byers.
Brother. Everybody hear me okay? Feel like I owe Rick some money now for that. Um, but anyway, I met him in high school. I wanted to start with that because I was lost, like many of us are. And I think might have been his first year with Youth for Christ, and he shows up at our high school, thinking, "Oh, there's got to be some guys here that I can connect with that maybe could help me build a program throughout the high school. Maybe some guys of influence. I don't know what he saw in me. Maybe I was that lost." Okay, but he sought me out, and of course, I pulled my Heisman move, and gave him the stiff arm for the whole time. But it was there in the people like Rick. I just appreciated those. All these people in my life over this story have continued to pour into me, and they didn't give up. So, as Chris mentioned, I think he said it took 3 years to get me here. Persistence, it paid off. I finally worked that out. But anyway, I was sharing that story, thankful for those people. I was in high school down the wrong path, and that was intentional. Okay, so everybody's had hardships in their life, but that was my goal. So that's a pretty sad goal when you're looking at the wrong circles, you're emulating the wrong people, and you're trying to find groups to do things a different way. Let's just put it that way. And through that process, I was entrepreneurial back then. I had started a business in high school, my first one, insulating, but back then I ran with the wrong people. I did what I wanted to do. I ended up getting stabbed 6 times. Um, ran with some guys, downtown Chicago that I shouldn't have been involved with. But again, that was what I was gravitating towards. So we all know that when we get in with the wrong crowds, everybody throughout my life didn't give up, and they continued to reach out, and that's what I always appreciate. And I guess that's why I make that my goal now, is to always stick with everybody, because I know how hard-headed I was, and I know how long it took for me to surrender. And that was a long process, and even that surrender was a long process. So never give up. There's always somebody in your life that needs you, and they appreciate you. And looking back, we can see these pieces coming together. So I was thankful to be here. I have the mentors. My friend Albert is watching, but he wasn't able to come. But people like that, people like Rick, these are people that I look to now that are mentors, and they pour into my life constantly. So find those circles. So through my years going through the high school, younger, I had the business started. It was all about me. Okay. I don't know if anybody else has done that, but we get self centered and start to see things through our own lens. So, with that lens, I thought everything revolved around me, everything revolved about what I wanted, where I was going, when I was going to do it, how I was going to get there. Again, some of the influence I had was more accumulation of wealth and recognition. As a young guy, I think I tried to find my identity in that, so knowing that even though I was trying to emulate older, successful people in my eyes, I didn't have it all together, so I was just trying to play that part and trying to be somebody at that moment. That only works for so long. So with that, I had to find my own way. Joined our country club in Kankakee, and through the country club, I started to see these groups, gravitate towards those groups. Again, I had a couple that reached out to me, good friends, constantly invited me to church. I constantly said no. So, then no, that's not me. You got the wrong guy. So, again, my friends Lori and Mickey, they didn't give up, constantly asked me, and eventually I went. Okay, so again, that persistence, I think it was a 3 or 4 year process for that as well. So I think there's a pattern here with my 3 year surrender. But anyway, it just took time to wear me down and to say, okay, maybe I need it, maybe it's okay. But they were so nice, and we don't know God's timing, so maybe it wasn't the right time for me, but then when it is, you'll know. So I've had that experience a lot through business as well, and got into that cycle of wanting to be somebody. So I did that, ran through our country club building the business for me. Again, I wanted it all about me, wanted to build it, wanted to buy the boats and the house on the water, and just all the toys, everything I could possibly do as a 23, 24-year old guy, because of my friends that were 20, 30 years older than me. They had all these things. So I started to do my wintering in Florida in my mid 20s, like I was retired. So again, only lasts for so long. So yeah, you build your house on a foundation, and I hadn't done that. So anyway, I continued to just live the life that I wanted to live, seek the pleasures, and chase the shiny objects that I thought were going to bring peace or security or comfort to me, and you realize that they don't. So through this process at the country club, I feel like I during that surrender, I finally gave up and said, okay, I'm going to go to church. I started to go with my friends a little bit. Through this process, I was tricked into going to Olivet Nazarene University is in our town in Kankakee County. So there was a guest speaker named Luis Palau. Okay. If anybody knows that name. So of course, my friend says, "Oh, Brian, you will love him. You being a young business guy, he's motivational, inspirational. All the business people should be there." Huh. Okay. Didn't know any better. Had no idea who the guy was. I went there. Through this process, I looked and I sat and I listened. And my friend Mickey is sitting next to me, and again, he looked like Howard Stern, or one of these guys. He was a DJ on the radio stations, long hair, Bermuda shorts in the winter. He's got his sunglasses on in there. He's 25 years older than me, and he's looking at me the whole time. You know, and Luis Plow is talking. He says this message was here. There's somebody in this room that was supposed to be here. And I'm looking around like, who's that? And but but I'm hearing this and didn't know what that was. But I'm feeling vulnerable, okay, and I can sense it. And Luis Blau's up there. He wouldn't give up either. Somebody in this room, and there's 5,000 people. Somebody was here for a reason. I know this message is here for someone, and whoever that is, I want to invite him up here on the stage. And I'm sitting here, and Mickey looks at me, and I'm getting choked up. And I'm just trying to hide. There's nowhere to hide. And he says, "B, that's you, isn't it?" I think so. You know, so I was literally broken down by the Spirit. and I felt it, didn't know what was going on. I mean, I felt like I just wanted to break out in tears. I had no idea. And again, I thought I was a young, tough guy. You know what I mean? So that was even more difficult for me trying to say, what is happening right here? So, of course, my friend holds my hand and walks me up there. And I prayed with Louis Plow and said, yeah, I need to make a change in my life. I have to make a change. And that was comforting at that moment, but it was scary, so I didn't know what I had done. There's 5,000 people staring at me. He gives me a book called Going Forward with Jesus Christ. Okay. One again that probably took me 10 years to open the cover. Still have it. I still have it. But I didn't know what I had done. I just knew that message was for me. So that's one thing that I always talk about in any situation right here is there's always somebody in this room. And even though we think, yes, I've been going to church, I've been doing something, sometimes that God works in those mysterious ways and he's got another plan with his timing. So I always just want to share that with people. Don't overlook that. So I did that. And through this part, I started to um, try to change my way. Like I said, I didn't know what I had done. I wanted to change my ways, but I was pulled towards everything, the temptations of the world. So at this time, I was gambling, pretty good on any game that anybody that wanted to take a bet. I had some bookies downtown Chicago, lost some money, and they were bookies that you don't lose money to. And I didn't have the money to pay them. So that was a turning point. Sorry, this is getting loud. That was a turning point in my life as well. Just to say, what do I do? Tuck my tail, go to these guys and say, I don't have your money. Okay. Didn't know how that would end. Um, I'm still here. Spoiler alert. But but anyway, it was a point where I was told if you've ever been in a situation like that, it's scary. And I was told this from now on, keep your bets small. And I'm like, what? No, from now on, I'm done with this gambling. It didn't work. It didn't work. I'm out of here. You know what I mean? I'm hitting the road. And never look back on that. But that was a lesson that I don't recommend, to somebody to have to go through because it wasn't comfortable. But the those changes, they were, the progressions were slow, and I needed those little road bumps, so we talk about that because that's how we persevere, how we grow in our spirit. So I did that again, not knowing what you're up against, and when you're new in the faith as I was, you don't realize that there are going to be those trials and tribulations. I hadn't read anything in James, and I didn't know what the Bible was. I mean, I was that green to it all, and so you just think that the world is closing in on you, and it becomes difficult. But when you have Christ, it makes it a lot easier, and you always have that center to go back to. So for me, I had that center now, and every time I'd screw up, I could at least revert back to, okay, there's still hope. Okay, there's still hope. Okay, I can start over again. So I would do that. So I got into, the personal story there is I felt convicted. I needed, if I shut that off on it, I may shut it off. There we go. Quick, moving fast. I needed to own my life, and I felt like I was still at the mercy of the world controlling what I was doing, where I was going. So made a decision, quit the country club, and said, this isn't for me. The men that I was trying to emulate, they weren't for me. They were what I was, without judgment, feeling they were of the world, and that was their goal, that was their desire, and I was being pulled away from that. So what I needed to do was find my own way and then get back to a Christ-centered life. Again, not having known what that was, I was trying to figure that out in the meantime. this process, again, I mentioned and glossed over it. I got stabbed 6 times. Okay. A lot of times that's where the questions always start firing, but I'm trying to just go through a lot of things here. But I was at a party. I got stabbed. My friend got stabbed in the heart. He died. But death was normal to me in high school. So I'm sure Rick experienced that and saw a lot of that. When we would return on a Monday, it was quite often we'd find out who had died over the weekend. So that was my years in high school. Not everybody lived a life that way, and I find that out because it was normal to me, and and I felt like it kind of hardened or blackened my heart. You become numb to that, and that's an experience you just go through. So, I'm sure there were Bradley Bourbonnais, yeah, south of here. So and I don't think it had anything to do with the high school or the location. There are plenty of areas that are worse. It wasn't that. It was the lifestyle that we all lived. I mean, it was the drinking, the car crashes, it was the depression, it was shootings, it was drug deals gone bad. It was suicide. It was a guy hung himself in jail. It just went on and on and on. It doesn't matter. Death was death, but it was all from misery and from a lifestyle that was our own, and it was very evident, and that's just what would happen. So that was half normal, just show up. Now the stabbing was a little bit different. There were maybe 7 other people got stabbed that night as well, but my friend had died um, at this house party. So with that, people are like, wow, where does that go? Where did that leave you? What happened? People want to hear about that. But I started to write those little stories, and I think that, I'm almost thankful for that now, because I didn't have those turning points to reflect on, or I didn't have the gambling stories. I also totaled a Porsche 911. I hit a house. Okay. Mhm. Yeah, it's not easy to do. So anyway, walked away from that one, and well, woke up in the hospital the next day, but walked away from it eventually. So that and numerous other cars. What I'm saying is the near death experience constantly, and seeing that is what solidified my relationship with Christ. That's what really I could reflect on and grow back and say, this is what happened. This is how I got out of it. So I started seeing value in myself, maybe perspective that I didn't have. I was going to live a life on purpose. Okay. So now I felt like, oh, I'm here for a reason. And a lot of people think that or feel that, and that's great. Um, but it just kept just affirming that I was doing the right things and that I was here. I was trying to help people to do whatever I could do. So with that, I was making those changes, changed my life. Had my business started, my first business I had started in high school. This one that I went into when Desert Storm started, I signed up for infantry and National Guard. Went to Fort Benning and 11 Bravo. Did not get deployed to Afghanistan or those areas because the shock and awe campaign, it ended while I was in Fort Benning, Georgia still. So I stayed there for AIT and spent that period in Fort Benning, and the war had ended. So, thankful looking back on that. But my mentality was I was hardened, and I thought that's why I signed up, because they needed somebody that maybe wasn't as smart like me to go over there and just be a bullet stopper, as we were told that's what we were there for. So anyway, that's what I signed up for. Getting back on all this, I had the business started small. I stepped away from the golf and the country club, and I was trying to make these changes. But I said, there's got to be more. And I was looking for that. And I got to where I needed to stop chasing money. And I started firing customers. And that's difficult for a young kid because I don't know any better. I had never heard the term firing customers, but it was gratifying. So, so it's something I'm extremely selective right now on what we do. Yeah. And who we work with and why. So, but that was back in the days of pagers. So if my pager was going off too often, you're out of here. So that's how we did it, but minimized it, and then developed a small business that is still small, but it works and it's effective and it's an outreach. So I say the same, the place that we're at is the place that we have that opportunity then to serve because that's where our time is spent. So I did that, reverted back in our coffee business, which I didn't want to go too much in detail, but he mentioned it. It's office coffee and bottled water. So we do a 5 gallon bottled water service south of Chicago there, and office coffee only. So nothing online, and we just serve all the offices, and we do a lot of residential for that as well. So with that, we started to tag everything serving more than coffee, and I started using that as a personal outreach. I started journaling, and I thought, oh, I have all these stories. I told you I had stepped away from the golf course. The only time that I went back was for a charity event or something like that. And it was actually a Youth for Christ event that I returned that I was involved with. And they had a guest speaker who was um, from the ministry affiliated with the PGA Tour. It was a PGA Tour player founded ministry called Links Players. So the CEO was the actual guest speaker, Jeff Hopper, who has passed away since, but he was the president and he had written a book called Go for the Green. And he was a speaker, and they paired me with him that day just to spend the day. We developed a friendship. He saw the changes I was trying to make in my life. And I think that was God maybe bringing me back to the game of golf. Okay, even though I had stepped away from the club for non-golf reasons, though I was trying to find my identity in the game and trying to emulate the wrong people, God brought me back that day with a purpose again. So all of a sudden I'm using the game of golf, and within a year I began sharing a little testimony at a church in Florida. Reached out to Jeff, said, I need some help. I don't know what do I share about a testimony? So he, it just helped me go through this. And then later they had said, we need some young blood on the ministries board for the PGA tour there. Would you come out? I'm like, you don't understand. I still don't even open the Bible. You know what I mean? What do you want me on a board? I mean, I was trying, but that still wasn't a priority to me. Um, but he saw the progression I was making and I was growing towards it. And I did that. So I went out to Fresno, got interviewed, sat with the board. And then all of a sudden I'm on the board of a ministry, and this is only years after 1996, sitting up on stage with Luis Palau, changing my life and not knowing what I had done. So God had a different plan. There was a drastic turning point, and I was just trying to follow his lead. Okay. I said, I don't know what I'm doing here. That's okay. I've never done this. That's okay. Just do it. Just do it. So I reached out to a pastor, when I was again trying to be Mr. Florida back then and spending my winters there. I'd still stay in touch with mentors, and I called my Bourbonnais pastor just to talk every so often because I didn't have that accountability when I was south. And I said, I really don't know what I'm doing, but I am opening the Bible. Okay, cool. So every once in a while, we'd do that by the phone. And we got to a verse in Romans because he knew that I was reaching people. He knew I was proactive. And it said, Romans 1, 11, 12, for I long to see you so that I may impart some spiritual gift to you to make you strong, so that you and I may both become mutually encouraged by each other's strong faith. We read that in Romans together on the phone. He said, I think that's it, Brian. I said, what is that? He said, I think that you need to just continue doing what you're doing, get in front of those people because some of them are now lukewarm. And he said, you'll understand that later in life. And you'll start to see some of these guys that, yeah, they've been there. Yes, they're church guys. Yes, they have testimonies. Yes, they're saved men, but they've moved on and they're content with a very comfortable life. And so I said, okay. So he said, just keep doing what you're doing. Stay in front of everybody, share your story, do what you're doing. So, okay. So, because I thought I needed to know everything, I needed to be a biblical scholar to go out there to witness to somebody. And I didn't realize, oh, no, sometimes your personal, just what you do is your witness. So I said, okay, okay. Started to get it. So that was easier for me. Went on the board, we started putting fellowship groups together inside private country clubs. And we would use the game and tool of golf to lure men in. saying, "Oh, we've got 10 guys that are meeting on a Wednesday morning, small fellowship, breakfast, coffee, and then we split into teams and then we play golf." And that would be a great way to capture men. So I did that for a few years. We worked with the Fellowship of Christian Athletes as well and had prayer breakfasts around PGA Tour events. Usually recruited a PGA Tour player of faith to come share their story in the community before the tournament started, usually on the Tuesday morning. So I got involved with that, got involved some with the Christian music industry in Nashville as well, in the film and production industry, which I'm still involved with all of those guys in Nashville. So God had a plan. He kept moving me forward, even though I wasn't the expert. I wasn't the educated in that field or having a degree or credentialed or anything in that industry. He kept saying, "It's okay. Just keep doing where I'm doing what I'm doing. You know, I'm putting you in the right place at the right time, and just trust my timing." So you are enough, kind of thing. So I just said, okay, okay, I'm just trying to show up. So through this process, um, got married 13 years ago for the first time. So that's been great. My wife is wonderful. She's watching right now, so I probably should say a lot more good things about her real fast, but not. No, she's wonderful. She's a perfect balance for me, and I didn't see that coming. That's not something I felt like I needed or wanted or could have recognized back then. Again, because it was all about me, and the last thing I needed was somebody else, to be that compliment to me. But you don't know what you don't know, and that was a big wake up call to me. So now we're both involved with doing our own self supported, missions and foundation, and we're wrapping up all of our stories into books. So we've been putting the books out, giving those out. I think I've gave some here in the over the years, but anyway, my first one probably came out 8, 9 years ago, and it was a faith testimonial. So that's why I said I didn't mind being vulnerable. I said I've already thrown it all out there. You know what I mean? I mean, some of it's watered down intentionally. It has to be, but it's all out there. And I was able to buy 5,000 copies of my own book. I said I didn't want to become a book salesman. I wanted to make a difference, so I give those books out. We still do that in Florida. Now we've turned all of our course and our information together, that God's still leading and we're trying to figure out where we're going. But it doesn't mean that we're still not hitting those speed bumps. I was talking when we first got here, I feel like we've been under a spiritual attack, and I think we're growing closer to God. We're doing more things. We're making a great impact. We're doing good things for the kingdom. But personally, my wife and I, we've been constantly under attack, and it's probably been 18 months or 2 years. We were living in Florida. Um, a lot of health issues. The both hurricanes hit our house in Florida. Didn't have insurance, so that was a huge setback. So I'm driving back and forth every 10 days working on the house. um, when we got the evacuation notice to flee Florida, it was mandatory. My wife hadn't been able to walk for 10 days or so at that time because she had some spinal issues. Couldn't even get her in the car or to get an MRI done because she couldn't lay flat for that. So we ended up having to have her crawl to the car, evacuate, lay down in the back seat. I put her on a luggage cart in Atlanta to get her in and out of the hotel, but so that was excuse me, that was our evacuation. So we're losing our house in a hurricane. My wife can't walk. We're on the phone trying to buy a wheelchair as we drive back to Illinois because we're like, how are we going to get you in and out of the car? Maybe we can find one at a Goodwill or something. But anyway, we've been constantly seeing this. And then my back would go out constantly. So I got stabbed in the back twice. So it has some effect on that. I've also cracked other bones and broken things from other car accidents. So I'm a crumpled mess. But the thing is, all these things keep coming back, and then they're coming back at the same time. And every time we feel like we're getting ahead with doing what we're seeing as God's plan, we get a little road bump, and that keeps happening. So again, if we didn't have Christ, and if I was looking at that back years ago, it wouldn't have worked because I would have been the one trying to figure out the plan. And now we're trying to say, it's okay, it'll work out. And we were thankful. Not everybody, excuse me, not everybody had a second home to come back to. So we spent the early weeks going back and forth to Florida where I was just bringing supplies and trying to help other people out because I'm like, oh, it can wait. Well, the time is still there. There's a lot of houses now around my area that are being torn down. We're downtown St. Petersburg, but it's slowly making its way back. And again, tomorrow morning I'll drive back down there and work on. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. So thank you. So anyway, those trials, everything is possible when you can get centered on Christ. And the reason that I keep going back to that is that I couldn't have done it then. The difference is that it had in the impact after the fact is the only way we get through it. And so we know that we're trying to plug that in, the little things that we can do. So when we talked about being significant and doing things on purpose, as a lot of people in here are probably businessmen also, and as businessmen and leaders, we have to be decision makers too. So not only was I making those decisions to say, okay, yes, Jesus, I'm here, yes, I'm going to follow you, yes, this is okay, that's okay. Same thing in business is I'm trying to take these applicable ideas and say, now we need to apply them and lead with them. So we're just trying to tie the two things together, try to always be a better listener and see where God would have us. So anyway, if I could leave anybody, I didn't know how much time. I think you're saying wrap up. Okay, yeah, but the one thing that a takeaway that I always want to leave is that it's not about us, and the gratification and the real glory is when we're actually listening. And even though we may be perceived as leaders, we have to also be followers. And we can say that yes, we're following Christ, but he's asking us to be intentional with what we're doing. And everybody that was persistent in pushing me in the right direction that I appreciated. I think there's people in all of our lives that that need that little nudge. So I'm just always encouraging us to be mindful of the people that are directly in our surrounding that need that little nudge that we can do a little bit more for. And there's always that spoken word. We don't know who needs to hear it or when they need to hear it. If we sit around in groups, sometimes we can become comfortable and say, I think everybody's okay, but we're not. We're not. And that's okay because we all have Christ. So whatever we are going through, know that that is okay as long as we have Christ centered. So I just want to encourage everybody to be intentional with what they're doing, and we all have that platform, that there's strategic ways that we can do it. So what I've done lately through the books and courses is we started being intentional and doing coaching and showing entrepreneurs how they can align their personal witness and testimony with their purpose in business. So it's a lot of fun. Writing about it, writing coaching programs, and doing those things. But the two are married together, and we are leaders and followers at the same time. So just be mindful of that. But I thank you, everybody. If anybody had a question,
You know, I would love if we would get with one guy at your table and just talk about a recent speed bump you've gone through. One guy at your table, and then we'll get back together. Just talk about a recent speed bump you've gone through. I know a lot of guys are gonna have questions. That's the problem. We don't have enough time. We'll go with one question before this, and we'll go with Pierce. You can ask your question. You're our master question asker.
Do you know Jim Essery,
That's not a good question.
Fellowship of Christian Athlete?
yeah, I got involved with them and had a great impact in my life and time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, good friend. Okay, question, just about your early life, the foundation your family, and, just did you have siblings and the impact of your mom and dad and how, and if you have kids now, you didn't mention that, but, how that has affected you.
Yeah, that's good. I know.
Write them down, write them down. Yeah, I'll take them with me and think about them. But I have stepchildren. So I hadn't been married, didn't have children. My parents, we were not church going people. So when it was the friends from the country club who were inviting me to church, or the Jeff Hoppers or the Jim Messeries or anybody that was willing to pour into me, that's where I was getting fed the word. Um, that impact since, I think we've been able to bring that back to the surrounding, not just within the family, but as he mentioned earlier, in everything that we're doing, whether it be in the business, I still use the game of golf just to connect. If anybody wants to play this afternoon, I'm in. But I also do holy smokes, so that impacts. So I'm trying to do it not just in the family, but create that family. So I have holy smokes, little men's fellowships with coffee and cigars that I do, and just bringing guys together. Some are believers, some aren't. But so there's that impact is what we're still trying to do, just a small outreach. So
Middle school kids or is he Holy Smokes group?
no, they're 21 to 80 is probably the age.